He bought his first car lot with a handshake, a bank loan, and a lot of quiet stubbornness, and then spent the next 6 decades proving that patience, discipline, and an eye for steady cash flow can build an empire as loud as any tech startup's press cycle. This is the story of Jim Pattison, a salesman who became a conglomerate, a private owner who preferred long horizons over quarterly flash, and a philanthropist who turned business success into one of Canada's most consequential giving legacies. James Allen Pattison was born on October 1, 1928, in the wide skies of Saskatchewan. He didn't arrive in the world cloaked in privilege. His family valued hard work, thrift, and steadiness. Those values would do more than shape his personality. They would become the operating system for every deal he made, every company he bought, and every boardroom decision he ever took. If you want a one-sentence summary of his playbook, find predictable businesses, buy them when they're undervalued or undermanaged, tighten the screws on execution, and then let reliable cash flow compound. Repeat. Over time, that approach doesn't just create wealth, it creates resilience. His corporate story officially begins in 1961. Pattison was selling used cars in Vancouver, and at the age of 32, he did something most people only dream of. He borrowed against his house and life insurance, put up everything he had, and bought the dealership where he worked. It was a risky move. It was also a profoundly instructive one. Ownership forced him to think like a capital allocator rather than a salesperson. It taught him creditor discipline. It taught him the value of reputation. From that first purchase, Pattison's expansion looks less like a fever dream and more like a deliberate, steady march. He didn't build a single blue ocean business that disrupted everything. He built dozens of dependable businesses across many industries: automotive, advertising, media, grocery, packaging, attractions, periodical distribution, and more. Each business was a cog in a larger machine that produced recurring revenue and, crucially, predictable cash flow. One of his earliest and most consequential pivots was into outdoor advertising. In the late 1960s, Pattison bought Neon Products and Seaboard Outdoor Advertising and slowly assembled what became Pattison Outdoor Advertising, a business with massive moat-like advantages. Billboards and transit advertising are local, monopoly-ish in certain corridors, and extraordinarily sticky. Once a location is controlled and advertisers build relationships, the revenue is steady and often inflation-linked. Pattison recognized this and treated out-of-home advertising as a foundational cash generator rather than a glamorous headline. That discipline paid off in stability, margins, and negotiating power. Broadcast media followed a similar pattern. The Jim Pattison Broadcast Group started by acquiring local radio stations and gradually grew into a regional media force. Pattison favored smaller and mid-market stations where local loyalty mattered more than global reach. He wasn't building a national media conglomerate to chase prestige. He was buying predictable audience franchises that local businesses would keep paying to reach. In an era before digital advertising destroyed the economics of many legacy media businesses, Pattison took a long, conservative view that turned modest stations into steady cash contributors. Retail grocery is another chapter in his story that shows his strategic temperament. In the late 1960s, he acquired Overweight Foods, a regional grocery chain, and over time that business expanded and evolved into Save-On Foods and a family of supermarket banners across Western Canada. Grocery is famously a low-margin, high-volume business, not glamorous, but brutally recession-resistant. People still need groceries in bad economies. Pattison treated supermarkets like infrastructure: invest in the supply chain, keep customers loyal, and extract steady margins across thousands of transactions. That philosophy made food retail a durable anchor in his empire. Pattison's approach to acquisitions is worth unpacking because it's the connective tissue that explains how such a diverse group of companies can coexist under one roof. He looks for 3 things: predictable cash flow, industries he can understand, or where local knowledge provides an edge, businesses that respond to operational improvement and discipline. That's not the language of fireworks, it's the language of compounding. When you can buy a company that pays you every month and then incrementally increase its profitability, you've created a long-term value machine. A few of Pattison's acquisitions have been both strategic and surprisingly audacious. In 1985, the Jim Pattison Group bought Ripley's Believe It or Not, an oddball global attractions and licensing business that seemed far from the staid world of billboards and car lots. It was a vertical play into entertainment and international licensing, and over the years, Ripley's grew into one of the group's most recognizable global brands. Later, in 2008, the group acquired the Guinness World Records franchise, a move that extended Pattison's reach into global publishing and brand licensing. These weren't impulsive celebrity buys, they were complementary bets. Entertainment and attractions generate unique revenue streams, ticketing, licensing, IP, that diversify cyclical exposure. Packaging and manufacturing were another strategic lane. From food service packaging to flexible packaging and corrugated products, these businesses fit Pattison's criteria: durable demand, repeat customers, and opportunities for operational improvement and scale. Packaging is often overlooked in headline accounts of industrial empires, but it's precisely the sort of low-glamour, essential industry that turns predictable revenue into capital for future buys. The Jim Pattison Auto Group remained a visible symbol of Pattison's beginnings, an operational powerhouse that continued to generate cash and credibility. But Pattison never let any single division dominate the group's identity. He resisted public markets and the quarterly earnings treadmill. Keeping the company private allowed longer views on investments, slower but steadier returns, and the ability to acquire assets without the pressure of immediate market reaction. Culture and leadership under Pattison are instructive. He was famously hands-on without being micromanaging. He liked names, not numbers. He kept executives accountable, but gave them autonomy. He believed in hiring good people, giving them authority, and then measuring outcomes. This mix of decentralized operations with centralized capital allocation is the same playbook you see in many successful conglomerates. The head office sets capital priorities, risk appetite, and acquisition criteria. Operating units focus on execution. Another hallmark of Pattison's leadership was conservative use of debt. He used leverage strategically, but avoided the sort of reckless borrowing that sinks companies in downturns. This balance, growth-seeking but risk-aware, let his group buy distressed assets in recessions when sellers were most willing, turning hard times into buying opportunities. Let's talk scale. Over decades, the Jim Pattison Group became one of Canada's largest privately held companies, with tens of thousands of employees and annual revenues measured in the billions. But scale here didn't come from a single breakout product. It came from disciplined accumulation. As one business produced cash, it funded the purchase of another. Over time, this snowballed into a diversified industrial conglomerate with exposure to consumer staples, grocery, media and advertising, industrial packaging, automotive retail, and entertainment attractions. Each sector tastes different, but the common ingredient is recurring money. Pattison also had an unusual appetite for geographic diversity. While the group's heartland is British Columbia and Western Canada, its portfolio spans North America and stretches into international markets through divisions like packaging and Ripley attractions. This geographic spread reduced local market risk and created cross-border scale for manufacturing and distribution. A major part of the Pattison story that demands attention is how business success translated into philanthropy. Pattison did not treat giving as a public relations checkbox. He wrote big checks to healthcare and research institutions, often funding infrastructure, hospital wings, research centers, and community healthcare initiatives. His donations, including a record private donation to help fund a new St. Paul's Hospital facility, are the sort of legacy gifts that change the face of public health in a region. Importantly, his philanthropic strategy reflected his business instincts. Invest in long-lasting infrastructure that outlives a single political cycle or program. There are also human notes to the story. Pattison's reputation for remembering names, calling managers directly, and valuing loyalty fostered a culture where people felt seen and held accountable. He was never a celebrity CEO in the Elon Musk sense. He was the kind of executive who quietly drove results and expected the same dedication from others. Critics will say conglomerates are old-fashioned, They'll point to the rise of focused tech winners and the market's favoring of pure-play businesses. But Pattison's career provides the counter-argument. There are industries where focus matters less than operational excellence. When your buys generate reliable free cash flow, valuation multiples become less of a pressurized variable and more of a market noise you can take advantage of. Pattison used market cycles to buy low and compound value, a classic capital allocator's playbook. Succession and governance are inevitable questions for any founder-led empire. Pattison handled this by professionalizing much of the group while retaining private ownership. He introduced structures and leadership teams that could operate without his constant intervention, and he remained involved as chair and CEO into advanced age. That continuity, combined with a strong second layer of executive talent, has been key to maintaining momentum while avoiding the short-termism of public markets. To understand the magnitude of Pattison's impact, look at the everyday life of consumers. The grocery stores where families shop, the billboards that shape cityscapes, the radio stations that play in cars, the packaging that protects products on shelves, and the attractions that tourists visit on holiday. Pattison's companies are not designed to be disruptive, they are designed to be necessary. That's a design choice as deliberate as any startup that chases scale through user growth metrics. Necessary businesses don't always make splashy headlines, but they pay the bills, hire the workers, and fund the philanthropy that follows. Pattison's patience is a recurring theme. He thought in decades. He bought companies that he could keep forever, or at least hold long enough to extract value through better operations and careful reinvestment. This patience is an essential lesson in an age where investors and founders often equate velocity with virtue. For Pattison, velocity without durability was no virtue at all. There were risks, of course. Diversified conglomerates can become unfocused. Acquisitions can go wrong. Family succession can fracture an empire. Pattison mitigated many of these risks through cautious debt use, careful selection of industries, and a personal approach to talent and relationships. He didn't chase headlines or publicity stunts, he chased businesses with moats. And then there's scale of giving. By the 2010s and 2020s, Pattison shifted into a phase where his business success enabled serious philanthropy. Massive donations to hospitals and medical infrastructure changed the healthcare landscape in British Columbia and Saskatchewan and created a public legacy that matched his private empire. He pledged and donated sums that were not symbolic but transformational, the kind of gifts that support modern operating rooms, research wings, and entire hospital facilities. Finally, legacy. Jim Pattison's story is a useful corrective to our cultural obsession with single-product billionaires and overnight success. His wealth was the product of compounding discipline, patient capital allocation, and operational excellence across mundane but critical industries. He shows that you don't need to invent a category to dominate it. You need to buy it, run it well, and treat stakeholders, customers, employees, bankers with respect. If you're looking for the business lesson to clip and pin to your wall, here it is. Focus on predictability. Protect your downside. Use leverage sparingly, and let compound cash flow do the heavy lifting. Add to that a willingness to move beyond your comfort zone into related industries, packaging, attractions, distribution, and you get the architecture of a modern conglomerate. James Pattison started by selling secondhand cars. He finished by owning brands and businesses that touch millions of lives. That arc, from a single dealership bought with a risky loan to an international diversified conglomerate, calls attention to a simple, stubborn truth. Empires don't need to be loud to be formidable. Sometimes the quietest capitals of power are the ones built by steady hands, compound interest, and decades of disciplined decision-making. When history writes the ledger of Canadian business in the 20th and 21st centuries, Jim Pattison's name sits next to a very specific model of capitalism, one that prizes long-term stakeholder value over flashy disruption and steady accumulation over instant fame. For entrepreneurs and investors, that model is as instructive as it is profitable. Build companies that earn month after month, treat your capital respectfully, and don't confuse noise with progress. That steady, patient accumulation left a dual legacy. a sprawling private empire that provided livelihoods and products across North America, and a philanthropic footprint that reshaped hospitals, research centers, and community institutions. For a man who began his career closing deals with a handshake, it's an empire that proves trust and time are often the most valuable currencies of all.